Shalom, my friends. Right now, as you watch this video, millions of Americans are lying awake at night, staring at their bank accounts, wondering how they'll make it to the end of the month. The credit card bills keep piling up, the mortgage payment feels like a weight crushing your chest, and every time you check your phone, there's another notification about an overdraft fee or a payment past due. You're working harder than ever before, but somehow the money just disappears. You feel trapped in a cycle of financial chaos, and no matter what you try, budgeting apps, side hustles, cutting expenses, nothing seems to bring real, lasting stability. Does this sound familiar? Here's what most people don't realize. The financial confusion you're experiencing isn't just about money. It's about something much deeper. It's about the absence of divine wisdom in how you approach prosperity. For thousands of years, the sages of Israel understood something that modern financial advisors are only beginning to discover. True financial stability doesn't come from earning more. It comes from aligning your financial life with eternal principles that were designed by the Creator Himself. The Torah isn't just an ancient religious text, it's a blueprint for prosperity, a divine architecture that, when properly understood and applied, transforms chaos into order, poverty into abundance, and anxiety into peace. But here's where it gets really interesting, and I need you to pay close attention because what I'm about to share with you could change everything. The sages of Israel didn't just teach theoretical concepts about money. They lived in times of extreme economic hardship, persecution, and uncertainty, yet they built communities of extraordinary wealth, stability, and generosity. They survived the destruction of the temple, exile from their homeland, centuries of oppression, and economic discrimination, yet Jewish communities became synonymous with financial success wherever they settled. How? The answer lies in 5 specific principles that the sages extracted from the Torah, principles so powerful that they've been passed down through generations, creating financial stability even in the most chaotic times. In this video, I'm going to reveal these 5 principles to you, and I promise you, this isn't going to be some vague spiritual talk about abundance mindset or positive thinking. These are concrete, actionable insights rooted in Torah wisdom that you can apply to your financial situation starting today, whether you're drowning in debt, living paycheck to paycheck, or just feeling like you're one emergency away from financial disaster. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why you've been stuck in financial confusion, and more importantly, you'll know the exact path the sages laid out to move from chaos to stability. So stay with me, because what you're about to learn has been hidden in plain sight for thousands of years, and it's about to transform your relationship with money forever. The first and most foundational principle the sages teach us is this: you don't actually own anything. Now, before you click away thinking this is some kind of communist manifesto, hear me out, because this principle is the exact opposite of what you think, and it's the key to unlocking financial stability. The sages understood from the Torah that everything in this universe belongs to the Creator. Your house, your car, your bank account, even the money you think you earned through your hard work. The Torah states clearly in Psalms 24:1, "The earth is the Lord's and everything in it, the world and all who live in it." This isn't poetic language. It's a fundamental truth about the nature of ownership in this universe. You are not an owner. You are a steward, a manager of resources that have been temporarily entrusted to you by the divine. Now, here's why this principle is absolutely revolutionary for your financial situation right now. When you believe that you own your money, you carry the entire burden of your financial security on your shoulders. Every financial decision becomes terrifying because if you make the wrong choice, you lose your money. This creates anxiety, fear, and ultimately, terrible financial decisions made from a place of panic rather than wisdom. But when you understand that you're a steward managing the Creator's resources, everything changes. Suddenly, you're not carrying the burden alone. You're partnering with the divine in managing these resources according to His principles. The sages taught that when you acknowledge divine ownership, you tap into divine guidance for how to manage those resources, and more importantly, you tap into divine provision. This is why the Torah commands us to give tzedakah, charitable giving, First, even before paying our own bills, not because God needs your money, but because this act acknowledges that the resources flowing through your hands aren't ultimately yours to hoard. The practical application of this principle is profound, especially in the American context where we're taught from childhood that success means accumulating and protecting my money. The sages would tell you that your financial confusion exists precisely because you're trying to be the sole owner and protector of resources that were never meant to be held that way. Think about water. When you try to clutch it tightly in your fist, it slips through your fingers, but when you hold your hand open and relaxed, water can flow through it continuously. Money works the same way in the Torah's system. When you acknowledge divine ownership by giving tzedakah, the sages recommended a minimum of 10% of income. By refusing to compromise your integrity for profit, and by managing resources according to Torah principles rather than fear-based thinking, you position yourself to receive continuous flow rather than stagnant accumulation. This is why Jewish communities throughout history practiced radical generosity even during their poorest times. They understood that acknowledging divine ownership through giving actually creates the channel for greater receiving. The confusion in your finances right now isn't because you don't have enough. It's because you're trying to own and control something that can only flow properly when you acknowledge its true source. The second principle the sages extracted from Torah is perhaps the most counterintuitive economic principle you'll ever encounter, and it directly addresses why you feel like you're on a hamster wheel of financial exhaustion. The commandment to observe Shabbat, to completely stop all work for 24 hours every single week, seems insane from a modern capitalist perspective. In America, we glorify the hustle, the grind, the person who works 80-hour weeks and sacrifices everything for financial success. We're told that if we're not constantly producing, constantly earning, constantly grinding, we'll fall behind and lose everything. The sages of Israel looked at this mindset and said, this is exactly backwards, and it's precisely why you're trapped in financial chaos rather than experiencing stability. Here's what the sages understood about Shabbat that modern economics is only beginning to discover. Forced rest isn't a luxury, it's a financial necessity. When you work 7 days a week, when you're constantly in survival mode, when every waking moment is consumed with earning or worrying about money, you actually destroy your capacity to make good financial decisions. Your stress hormones are constantly elevated, your decision-making becomes impaired, and you fall into reactive rather than strategic thinking. The Torah's commandment to observe Shabbat is actually an economic intervention designed to break the cycle of panic-driven financial behavior. By forcing you to stop for 24 hours every week, the Torah creates a rhythm of trust. You trust that the universe won't collapse if you stop working. You trust that the divine provision that sustained you for 6 days will continue, and you create mental and spiritual space to gain perspective on your financial situation rather than being consumed by it. The sages taught that observing Shabbat is like pressing a reset button on your financial consciousness every single week, preventing the accumulation of toxic stress that leads to terrible money decisions. But here's where this principle becomes truly powerful, especially for Americans struggling with debt and financial instability. The sages taught that the way you observe Shabbat directly impacts your financial flow for the entire week. In the Talmud, there's a teaching that says, all of a person's sustenance for the week is determined by their Shabbat observance. This doesn't mean God is sitting in heaven punishing you for working on Saturday. It means that the quality of rest, reflection, and spiritual alignment you achieve during Shabbat directly affects the quality of your financial decisions and opportunities during the week. Think about it practically. When you take one full day every week to completely disconnect from work, to reconnect with family, to study wisdom, to pray and reflect, you gain clarity that's impossible to achieve in the chaos of constant hustle. You start seeing opportunities you were too stressed to notice. You make decisions from a place of peace rather than panic. You build relationships that lead to unexpected financial blessings. You develop the patience to wait for the right opportunity rather than desperately grabbing at anything. The sages knew that financial stability isn't built through constant, frantic activity. It's built through cycles of focused work, followed by complete rest and spiritual realignment. If you're currently working 7 days a week and still broke, the sages would tell you that you're not working too little. You're resting too little, and that lack of rest is creating the very confusion and instability you're trying to work your way out of. The third principle the sages emphasized is one that directly confronts the toxic financial culture in modern America, where cutting corners, manipulating systems, and gaming the economy is not only accepted, but often celebrated. The Torah is absolutely uncompromising on this point. You shall not have in your bag alternate weights, larger and smaller. You shall not have in your house alternate measures, a larger and a smaller. You must have completely honest weights and completely honest measures. Deuteronomy 25:13-15. The sages expanded this commandment far beyond literal weights in the marketplace. They understood it as a fundamental principle that governs all financial transactions, all business dealings, and ultimately all prosperity. This principle of absolute honesty in financial matters is called emet ve'emunah, truth and faithfulness, and the sages taught that violating it is one of the fastest ways to create chaos in your financial life, even if you think you're getting ahead by bending the rules. Now let's talk about why this principle is so critical for your financial stability right now, especially in the American context. We live in a culture that constantly tempts us to take shortcuts, underreporting income on taxes, inflating insurance claims, padding expense reports, using services without paying, taking advantage of return policies dishonestly, or engaging in any number of small, dishonest practices that we rationalize as everyone does it, or the system is rigged anyway, so I'm just evening the playing field. The sages would tell you that every single one of these small acts of financial dishonesty creates a crack in the vessel that's supposed to hold your prosperity. It's not about divine punishment. It's about the fundamental spiritual economic principle that dishonesty creates chaos and instability, while absolute integrity creates a foundation for blessing. The Talmud teaches, whoever steals even the smallest amount, it's as if they took someone's soul, not because God is being harsh, but because dishonesty, even in tiny amounts, corrupts the entire financial system of your life and prevents genuine abundance from flowing to you. Here's the revolutionary insight the sages offer. When you commit to absolute honesty in all financial matters, paying every debt, honoring every commitment, being transparent in all transactions, never taking advantage of others' ignorance or mistakes, you create what the sages called a kli, or vessel, that can actually hold blessing. Think of it like trying to fill a bucket with holes versus one that's completely sealed. Every act of financial dishonesty, no matter how small or justified you think it is, creates another hole in your bucket. You might be working incredibly hard and earning decent money, but if your financial vessel has integrity holes, the money will flow through without creating stability. This is why the sages taught that the first question a person is asked in the heavenly court is, were you honest in business? Not, how much did you give to charity? Or, how many prayers did you say? Because honesty in financial matters is the foundation upon which all other blessings can build. In practical American terms, this means pay your taxes fully and honestly even when you could hide income. Return money when you're given too much change. Honor your word in business deals even when it costs you. Never manipulate return policies or insurance claims. Be transparent about the condition of things you sell. The sages promise that when you create a vessel of absolute integrity, the divine can actually fill it with sustainable abundance, whereas all the hustling in the world can't fill a bucket full of holes. Your financial confusion might not be about how much you're earning, it might be about the integrity of the vessel you're trying to fill. The fourth principle the sages teach is perhaps the most difficult for Americans to accept, yet it's absolutely essential for moving from financial confusion to stability. The principle of sameach b'chelko, being genuinely content with your portion. In Ethics of the Fathers, Pirkei Avot 4:1, the sages ask, who is wealthy? And answer, one who is content with their portion. Now this doesn't mean accepting poverty or not striving for improvement. The sages never taught passivity or lack of ambition. What they understood is that the endless appetite for more, the constant comparison with others, and the belief that happiness lies in the next purchase or the next income level is actually the primary source of financial chaos in people's lives. In modern America, we're bombarded 24/7 with messages designed to make us feel inadequate with what we have. Advertising algorithms that know our insecurities, social media that shows us everyone else's highlight reels, a culture that measures human worth by net worth, and an economic system built on the premise that contentment is bad for business, so we must be kept in a perpetual state of wanting more. Here's why this principle is absolutely critical for your financial stability. When you're not content with your portion, you make financial decisions based on comparison and fear rather than wisdom and strategy. You buy things you can't afford because someone else has them. You take on debt to maintain an image. You switch jobs constantly chasing slightly higher salaries while sacrificing stability and skill development. You feel anxious and inadequate no matter how much you earn because there's always someone earning more. The sages taught that this state of perpetual dissatisfaction is called sheyein lomea, rotse matayim. Whoever has 100 wants 200. And they identified it as a spiritual disease that makes financial stability impossible. It's not that you shouldn't want to improve your situation, it's that your baseline emotional state must be genuine gratitude and contentment with what you currently have, even as you work toward better. Without this foundation of contentment, no amount of money will ever feel like enough, and you'll perpetually make decisions from a place of not enough, which creates actual financial scarcity in your life. The practical application of this principle in your life right now is transformative. The sages would tell you to begin each day by listing, out loud, specific things you're grateful for in your current financial situation. Even if you're in debt, even if you're struggling, there are things working. You probably have food today. You probably have shelter. You probably have more than billions of people on this planet. This isn't toxic positivity or denying real problems. It's rewiring your financial consciousness from scarcity to sufficiency, which then allows you to make strategic decisions from a place of stability rather than panic. The sages taught a practice of saying, Dayenu, it would have been enough, regularly, which trains your mind to recognize abundance even in challenging circumstances. In practical terms, this means stop comparing your financial situation to others on social media. Stop upgrading your lifestyle every time your income increases. Practice gratitude for what's working even as you address what's not. Recognize that the person you're comparing yourself to probably has their own hidden financial struggles. Understand that contentment isn't the enemy of ambition, it's the foundation of wise ambition. When you can genuinely say, I'm content with my current portion while working toward better, you stop making desperate financial decisions and start making strategic ones. The sages knew that financial confusion comes not from having too little, but from wanting too much, and that true wealth begins with contentment that creates a foundation for stable growth rather than chaotic grasping. The fifth and final principle the sages teach is perhaps the most radical departure from American individualistic financial culture, yet it's the principle that historically created the most extraordinary financial stability in Jewish communities worldwide, the principle of Kol Yisrael Arivim Zeh Bazeh, all of Israel is responsible for one another. This Torah principle establishes that you are not a financial island, that your prosperity is intimately connected to the well-being of your community, and that true financial stability can never be achieved through pure individualism. The sages developed elaborate systems based on this principle: communal funds for the poor, interest-free loans for community members, collective responsibility for ensuring everyone had their basic needs met, and business practices that prioritize community well-being over individual maximum profit. This wasn't charity or socialism. It was a sophisticated understanding that individual financial stability is actually impossible without community financial stability, and that the highest form of financial wisdom is recognizing your interdependence with others. Now, here's why this principle is absolutely critical for Americans struggling with financial chaos right now. Modern American financial culture teaches extreme individualism. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps, every person for themselves. Asking for help is weakness, sharing your financial struggles is shameful, and your success or failure is entirely your individual responsibility. This cultural messaging leaves millions of Americans suffering in silent financial desperation, too ashamed to ask for help, too isolated to receive community support, and too individualistic to recognize that collective solutions might be more powerful than individual struggle. The sages would look at this situation and say it's precisely backwards. Financial isolation is what creates chaos, while community financial interdependence creates stability. When you're connected to a community that has systems for helping members through financial difficulties, when you have access to interest-free loans instead of predatory credit cards, when you can share resources and knowledge and opportunities, when your success inspires others to help you succeed further, you create a completely different financial reality than the isolated individual fighting alone against an economic system designed to extract wealth from those who can least afford it. The practical application of this principle transforms everything about how you approach your financial situation. The sages would tell you, stop trying to solve your financial problems entirely alone. Find or create a community of people committed to mutual financial well-being. Be willing to share your struggles and ask for help. Participate in or establish GMOC, free loan, systems, where community members provide interest-free loans to each other, share financial knowledge and opportunities with others rather than hoarding them, celebrate others' financial success rather than envying it, recognize that helping others financially actually strengthens your own financial stability by creating a network of reciprocal support. In Jewish communities throughout history, even during extreme poverty and persecution, these community financial systems meant that while individuals might struggle temporarily, very few fell into permanent destitution because the community had collective responsibility. Compare this to modern America, where you can be surrounded by wealthy people, yet fall into homelessness, because there's no sense of collective financial responsibility. The sages taught that when you operate from Kol Yisrael Arevim, when you recognize your financial interdependence with community, you tap into collective wisdom, collective resources, and collective divine blessing that's impossible to access as an isolated individual. Your financial confusion might persist specifically because you're trying to navigate it entirely alone, without community support, accountability, wisdom sharing, or collective action. The Torah's vision of financial stability was never about isolated individual wealth. It was always about community prosperity, where each person's well-being is supported by and contributes to the well-being of all. So, my friends, we've journeyed through 5 profound principles that the sages of Israel extracted from Torah wisdom, principles that have guided Jewish communities from chaos to stability for thousands of years across countless circumstances of persecution, displacement, and economic uncertainty. These aren't theoretical concepts, they're practical tools that work specifically because they align your financial life with the divine architecture of prosperity that the Creator embedded in the Torah. We've learned that acknowledging divine ownership frees you from the burden of trying to control everything alone. That Sabbath rest creates the mental and spiritual space necessary for wise financial decisions. That absolute honesty creates a vessel capable of holding blessing. That contentment with your portion liberates you from the prison of endless comparison and desire, and that community interdependence creates a safety net and support system that isolated individualism can never provide. Now, I need you to understand something crucial. Knowing these principles intellectually changes nothing. The sages didn't teach these ideas, so we could nod our heads and say, "That's interesting," and then continue living the same way we always have, trapped in the same financial confusion and chaos. These principles require action. They require you to make concrete changes in how you think about and handle money starting today, right now, in your actual life circumstances. You can't acknowledge divine ownership while hoarding every penny in fear. You can't claim to observe Sabbath principles while working yourself into exhaustion 7 days a week. You can't embrace honesty while continuing to cut corners in your business dealings. You can't practice contentment while constantly comparing yourself to others on social media. You can't build community responsibility while maintaining total financial isolation and secrecy. The sages would tell you that each of these principles is a door, but you have to actually walk through it. Knowledge alone keeps you in the same place. Here's what I want you to do immediately after watching this video. Choose one principle, just one, that resonated most deeply with your current situation. The one that felt like it was speaking directly to your specific financial struggles. Maybe it's the principle of divine ownership, if you're carrying crushing anxiety about money. Maybe it's Sabbath economics if you're exhausted from constant hustle with no results. Maybe it's honesty if you know there are areas where your integrity has been compromised. Maybe it's contentment if you're trapped in comparison and never feeling like you have enough. Maybe it's community if you're isolated and trying to solve everything alone. Choose one and commit to implementing it fully for the next 30 days. Not halfway, not I'll try, but full commitment to living that principle exactly as the sages taught it. Watch what happens when you align even one area of your financial life with Torah wisdom. You'll start to see shifts not just in your bank account, but in your relationship with money, your peace of mind, and your sense of stability. The sages of Israel navigated every form of economic hardship imaginable: exile, persecution, the destruction of their homeland, centuries of discrimination. Yet they built communities of extraordinary financial stability and generosity because they understood something most people miss. Financial stability isn't ultimately about money, it's about wisdom. And the deepest financial wisdom available to humanity is contained in the Torah. You don't have to remain trapped in financial confusion. You don't have to keep cycling through the same patterns of debt, anxiety, and instability. The path from chaos to stability has already been mapped out by the sages. It's been tested across thousands of years and proven in every economic condition imaginable. The question is, are you ready to actually walk that path, or are you going to keep trying to solve your financial problems using the same thinking that created them? The choice is yours, my friend. Shalom, and may your journey from confusion to stability begin today, guided by the ancient wisdom that has sustained our people through every storm.